I still remember the way the sunlight filtered through the curtains that Sunday afternoon, soft and golden, almost like it was trying to give me one last gentle moment before everything shattered. I had taken extra care that morning, ironed my shirt twice, polished my shoes until I could see my reflection, even stopped by the florist to get a bouquet of lilies, her childhood favorite. My daughter had invited me to a dinner at her house, a rare gesture these days since she got married. I didn't ask questions. I simply said, "I'll be there," because that's what fathers do. We show up, even when the invitation feels more like an obligation than love. I arrived 10 minutes early and stood outside the gate for 5, just breathing in. It wasn't the nerves, it was the weight of memories. I remembered carrying her through flu seasons, drying her tears after her first heartbreak, skipping meals to afford her textbooks in college. And now here I was, rehearsing how to greet her in-laws without sounding embarrassing. Her husband's family was well off, elegant, and proud of it. I was a retired construction foreman with calloused hands and a quiet voice. I knew I didn't fit their image. But still, I came, because love doesn't care about appearances. Inside, everything looked perfect. The table was set with gold-trimmed dishes, the air smelled like garlic-roasted lamb, and jazz music hummed softly in the background. Her mother-in-law sat at the head of the table, adorned in pearls, smiling like a queen surveying her court. My daughter introduced me as Dad, with a tight smile, as if the word itself tasted like rust. I offered the bouquet, and her mother-in-law blinked twice before saying, "Oh, how quaint." No one laughed, but everyone heard. I felt my heart sink just a bit, but I said nothing. Dinner went on, but the insults began to stack like silent cards in a game only I didn't know I was playing. "We only drink imported wine in this house," her mother-in-law announced when I asked for water. Before we dive into the story, we'll love to thank you for your continued support to this channel. If you enjoy this story and stories like this, kindly subscribe and hit on the notification button so you don't miss any of our stories. We will love to hear from you also. Tell us where you're watching from in the comment section. We'll love to give you a shout out in our next video. Now let's begin. Some people still think casseroles are gourmet, she chuckled at some point, eyeing me. My daughter didn't defend me. Not once. She smiled, sipped her wine, and even giggled along. I tried to remind myself she was trying to fit in, that maybe, deep down, she didn't mean it. But when her husband raised a toast to the women who shape our lives, and they all turned toward his mother, I felt invisible in a room I was invited to. After dessert, I gently placed my napkin on the table and stood up. "Thank you for the meal," I said softly, "but I think I should head out now." I didn't want to cause a scene. I didn't want to beg for respect. I just wanted to leave with what dignity I had left. But then my daughter stood too. "No, you're not going anywhere," she said sharply. Her voice cut through the room like a blade, and I turned, surprised. She walked up to me, eyes blazing, and before I could ask what was wrong, she slapped me. Not a playful tap, not a dramatic moment. A cold, hard slap. And then she said it. "She's more family than you could ever be." I stood there, my cheek burning, not just from the impact, but from the shame, the betrayal, the realization that the child I gave my life for had chosen someone else's approval over my love. Silence wrapped the room. No one said a word. Her husband shifted awkwardly. The mother-in-law sipped her wine. And my daughter? She stared at me as if I were a stain she wanted removed from the carpet. My hands trembled, not from anger but from grief, the kind of grief that makes you feel like the ground under you is gone. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't cry. I just whispered, "I understand," turned around, and walked out the door. Outside, the sky had turned gray, and for the first time in years, I felt cold. Not the kind of cold a jacket could fix, but the kind that seeps into your bones and tells you something inside has broken. I walked to my car, unlocked it slowly, and sat behind the wheel, staring at my shaking hands. How did we get here? How did a man who gave everything become disposable? As I started the engine, I looked at the rearview mirror, and for a second, I thought I saw my younger self, the man who once held a baby girl in his arms and promised to always protect her. I blinked, and he was gone. I didn't drive home. I didn't call anyone. I turned off my phone, took the longest road out of the city, and just drove. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew what I was leaving behind. Sometimes, the only way to survive betrayal is to vanish, to become a ghost in the life you once built, to let them feel your absence louder than your presence ever was. And in that moment, I made a silent vow. I would no longer chase love where it wasn't freely given. I would disappear, not to punish, but to heal. Because the man who walked into that dinner was a father. The man who walked out was something else entirely. I kept driving long after the city lights faded behind me, long after my gas tank had blinked its final warning. When I finally stopped, it was at a quiet, dusty roadside in 2 towns over, with flickering neon lights and no expectations. The kind of place where no one asks questions, just hands you a key and points to a room. I didn't unpack. I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the cracked wallpaper, listening to the hum of the air conditioner, and feeling something unravel deep inside me. The sting on my cheek had faded, but what it left behind was far worse: emptiness. For the first 3 days, I didn't speak to anyone. I turned off my phone, tossed my SIM card into a trash bin outside a diner, and paid for everything in cash. I felt like I had stepped out of my old life and was now hovering somewhere in limbo. Nameless, faceless, untraceable. It wasn't a calculated disappearance. It was instinct survival. When your heart is shattered in public by the one person you thought would never turn against you, silence becomes your only companion. And in that silence, I began to remember who I was before I became a father, before every decision revolved around someone else. Eventually, I found my way to a coastal town called Grey Wind, tucked between tall cliffs and a moody shoreline. It wasn't special by any big city standards, but to me, it felt like peace. The people were kind in a distant way, cordial without curiosity. I rented a small cottage from an old fisherman who didn't care about names, only that I paid my dues on time. I started doing odd jobs, helping him fix boats, carrying supplies, painting weather-worn fences. My hands, already rough from years of work, found new rhythm in these tasks. No one here knew who I was, and that was the point. Each night, I'd sit by the ocean, staring into the horizon, wondering where she thought I had gone. Did she care? Did she even miss me? Or had I become a footnote in her new family narrative? A man she once knew, but conveniently erased to fit her polished world? I refused to search for her name online. I refused to ask anyone anything. I was done chasing ghosts who lived in houses I paid for, eating at tables I built, laughing with people who mocked me. And yet, beneath the salt air and freedom, a part of me still mourned. Because vanishing doesn't erase love, it just silences it. A few weeks into my new life, I walked into a small cafe to escape the rain. The woman behind the counter was in her 60s, warm-eyed and soft-spoken. She offered me coffee on the house when she heard I'd helped repair old Mr. Harley's fishing boat. "We take care of our own here," she said with a knowing smile. That phrase stuck with me. I wasn't anyone's own anymore, but for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel unwanted. I began spending more time at the cafe, helping with deliveries, fixing shelves, cleaning gutters. She never pried, never asked about my past, and I never told. Then one morning, nearly 4 months after the slap, I received a letter, not a text, not an email, but an actual letter. It had no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. My daughter. I stared at the envelope for an hour before opening it. Inside were 2 things: a short, cold message and a legal notice. "I hope you're well," she wrote. "We need to resolve ownership on the 2 properties still in your name. Our lawyer says you've not responded. Please handle it. We can't keep waiting." No apology. No dad. Just legal jargon and entitlement. As if I were some inconvenience she wanted cleaned up. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already transferred those properties. A week after the slap, I had quietly sold them to a private charitable foundation I had set up in a lawyer's office downtown. I named it The Father's Hand, not because I expected recognition, but because it was my final act of giving. The foundation would house abused seniors, men discarded by their families, just like me. The only asset I kept hidden was a cabin up north, tucked in the woods by a lake, listed under an old alias I used in my 20s. I kept it not out of greed, but as a reminder that I still had something untouched by betrayal. I didn't respond to her letter. Not yet. I wasn't ready to re-enter a world where love came with contracts and affection had expiration dates. Instead, I walked to the beach, let the waves touch my toes, and whispered into the wind, "I am not who they say I am." And I meant it. In Grey Wind, I was not a father. I was not a failure. I was just a man who rebuilt himself from broken glass. Every nail I drove into a dock, every smile I received from strangers, every quiet morning coffee, it stitched me back together in ways therapy never could. But deep down, I knew the story wasn't over. People like my daughter didn't stop at letters. They sent lawyers. They filed claims. And most of all, they waited. Waited for you to come crawling back so they could slam the door one last time. But I wasn't crawling anywhere. I had disappeared once. And if needed, I would disappear again, this time with a legacy they couldn't touch. I had found my voice again, and the man they once dismissed was no longer the same man they'd meet should they ever find me. They thought I had disappeared for good. And honestly, I nearly did. If peace had a shape, it would have been the early mornings in Grey Wind. Warm coffee, the smell of seaweed in the wind, my hands busy, my heart finally quiet. But as much as I wanted to stay hidden forever, life has a way of circling back. One morning, about 10 months since I walked away, I got a call on the cafe landline. I didn't usually answer it, but the owner waved for me to pick up. "Might be for you," she said. I hesitated, but I lifted the receiver anyway. The voice on the other end was trembling. "My daughter." "Dad?" She whispered, as if testing to see if I still existed. "It's me. Can we talk?" For a long moment, I said nothing. I looked at the sea outside the window, the sky heavy with clouds, and the ache in my chest stirred again, but not like before. It was sharper now, more aware. "Where did you get this number?" I asked. She told me she had traced the charity I donated my properties to, then followed the breadcrumb trail to this town. "Please," she said, "we're in trouble." I could hear tears in her voice, real or rehearsed. I couldn't tell. But I told her I was busy. "If you're calling for the property," I added, "you'll need to contact the board directly. I don't handle it anymore." But she wasn't done. Over the next few days, more letters arrived. This time, the tone had changed. She talked about how her mother-in-law had grown ill, how her husband's business had collapsed after a string of bad investments, how she was working 2 jobs just to pay rent. Then came the part that hit me hardest. "I wish I had you around, Dad. I miss you." But I didn't respond, not yet. Not because I was cruel, but because I needed to be sure she missed me, not my wallet or my resources. I wanted to see who she became when there was nothing left to gain. So I watched from a distance. I drove to her city one weekend, parked across the street from the diner she now worked at, and sat in my car for an hour. There she was, hair tied up, apron smudged, smile practiced, but eyes tired. Every now and then, she'd glance toward the door like she was waiting for someone. Maybe me. Maybe not. I didn't walk in. I wasn't ready. But it was the first time in nearly a year I saw her without anger. Just as a human being, flawed, broken, and perhaps finally waking up. A week later, I was invited to a charity gala in a neighboring city. The Father's Hand had grown, thanks to a few donations and local partnerships. They were honoring founding members, and I had agreed to attend discreetly. I wore a simple suit, trimmed my beard, and entered quietly. But nothing in me was prepared for what I saw when I stepped into the hall. My daughter was there, standing near the entrance with her husband, both of them looking like they hadn't slept in days. Her eyes met mine across the room, and I saw them widen. She walked toward me slowly, as if afraid I'd vanish again. "Dad," she said, her voice barely audible. "I didn't know you'd be here." I nodded. "I didn't come for you," I replied. "I came to support a cause that mattered to me." Her husband stood a few paces behind, awkward and silent. "Please," she said again, "can we talk privately?" I agreed, mostly out of curiosity. We stepped outside, near the back of the building under a string of dim garden lights. "I'm sorry," she said, "for everything." I was blinded by pride, by the people I surrounded myself with. I thought I had everything figured out. I didn't realize I was destroying the one person who'd been there for me all my life. I looked at her carefully. This wasn't the cold, dismissive woman who had once slapped me to impress a dinner table. This was someone who'd been humbled by time, by hardship, by life's brutal lessons. "You told me once," I said slowly, "that she was more family than I could ever be. Do you still believe that?" Her eyes welled up with tears. She shook her head, unable to speak. "Then let me tell you something," I continued. "I didn't vanish to punish you. I vanished because sometimes the only way to love someone who's hurting you is from a distance." She broke down crying, gripping her own hands like a child trying to make herself small. "I don't expect forgiveness," she whispered. "I just want to know if there's still a place for me in your heart." I sighed deeply. "There's always a place," I said, "but the door is no longer wide open. If you want to come in, you'll have to knock and wait. You'll have to earn trust, just like I had to earn peace." We parted ways that night, not fully reconciled, but no longer strangers. I returned to Greywind the next morning, and I haven't moved since. She calls once in a while. Sometimes I answer. Sometimes I don't. I'm not trying to rewrite history. I'm just trying to live what's left of my life without bitterness. I built something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal, and I won't burn it down just to be loved again. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't slamming doors. It's rebuilding quietly and letting them see what they lost. And if you're wondering whether I ever forgave her, I'll say this: I no longer feel the slap, but I still feel the silence that followed. If this story moved you, or reminded you of how fragile family ties can be when pride takes the wheel, then don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful story. Would you forgive someone who chose strangers over you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it.